So what we're going to cover off today. So the agenda for today, there's 5 things we're going to cover off. We're going to talk about kind of generally what PMO managers do, why they exist, why an organization will have one in place, what the types of activities that they undertake, and also then we'll lead on to what knowledge, skills and behaviors are actually needed to be effective. And then we've got Lindsay's joining us. I think she might put her picture on as well and come and say hello to us. Hi, Lindsay.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
So once we've covered off the day today, what the managers do, we will go on to the knowledge, skills and behaviours needed to undertake that role and to be successful in that role. We'll then go on to kind of what does the career part of the kind of how do we get to that development? Again, this is where we'll refer back to the House of PMO certification and what that does and prepares us for the role. And then going on to talk about the career path of a PMO. So kind of some typical steps of what your first PMO manager job might look like, and then how that becomes more developed as you gain more experience and competence in the role. And then we'll just have a quick conversation about kind of how to become a PMO manager at all. Now, for those of you who've played with Zoom before and been to one of our presentations, just want to remind you that we use chat quite extensively. So it is a webinar, so we won't necessarily do a huge load of interaction, but if you do want to ask a question or you've got something to say, then please just type that in the chat window and we will pick up that. Either Lindsay will answer in chat, or I will actually kind of pick that up and deal with that as one of the questions as we go through the session today. So we've got quite a few people attending. There's a few more people coming on as we speak. I can kind of open the mic if we need to get somebody to speak. So if you've got a really burning question, then just let us know. So let's get started in terms of kind of why do PMO managers exist? Why would an organization want a PMO manager? It's interesting. We have lots of kind of conversations in terms of what does a PMO do? Well, actually, without the PMO manager, the likelihood is that you're not going to have a PMO. So the PMO manager is there to actually identify what's required by a particular PMO and to set up that PMO, to run that PMO, and if required, to transform what that PMO does as it goes through its life cycle, and then also to close down the office when required. So we often talk about, kind of, well, should PMO offices actually kind of shut down? Whereas if you're setting up a temporary office for a project or a program, the expectation is at the end of that project, the PMO should be shut down. And at the end of the program, the PMO should be shut down. There are situations, even when you're running a centre of excellence or a portfolio office, where you want to shut that office down because the organisation has gone through a kind of, the organisation is doing a kind of reshuffle and there's going to be a different structure of PMOs. But typically when we're talking about closing an office, we mean closing down a project or programme office. So that's essentially the kind of the role of the PMO manager, is to kind of look at the full life cycle of the PMO and everything that needs to happen to make sure that the PMO is delivering what it is required to deliver for whatever purpose that a PMO has been set up. So again, when we're talking about the running of that PMO, that will be making sure that the services that are provided by that PMO are running effectively and efficiently, that the staff that sit within that PMO are being appropriately looked after in terms of kind of development and support. And again, we've talked about kind of transform and close. Now, it is worth mentioning that in some organisations, it may be that as a PMO manager, you're actually also responsible for the delivery team. When I say the delivery team, that can be the project and programme managers and possibly some business analysts. And we'll talk a bit more about that when we talk about the career path of the PMO. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about kind of the detail, we're going to cover a bit more in the webinar, but you'll see there's a picture of the PMO competency framework. The PMO competency frameworks provides a detailed role description for the PMO manager where we've extracted this information, and also then some links to the various competencies. So you'll find the role of the PMO manager alongside the role of the administrator, the analyst and the director, but the manager is the one that we're interested in today. So in terms of kind of actually becoming a PMO manager, in terms of kind of what kind of experience is required, typically to become a PMO manager, you will have done some work in a project, program or portfolio management environment. It's typically not your first project management role. You tend to have some experience before they will give you that. And ideally, you will have some previous experience in working in a PMO or working with a PMO, providing support to projects, programs, or portfolios. So it's not very often, and I would suggest not recommended, that this is your first ever job as a PMO. Now, I have to say, one of the things that we found as we've been kind of delivering some of these courses is we get quite a few individuals who've come on the course and said, honestly, on the administrator course, who said, I've been asked to set up a PMO for the organization. And typically at that PMO administrator, PMO analyst role, it's an interesting challenge for you to actually kind of step into that PMO manager role if you've had no PMO experience before. So it is something that kind of happens. It tends to be not in big, large corporates where to be a PMO manager, you will have had some previous experience before. And it is worth saying that there is also the potential for you to come into a PMO manager role if you've been a project or program manager. Now, this is a real big turn of events, because when I first went into a PMO, lots of people said, oh, so when you grow up, Eileen, are you going to be a project manager? So a lot of people still do go into the PMO to learn about project and program management. And then when they understand enough, they go off and then be a project or program manager. Now, I have actually kind of done a PMO, a project manager role prior to going into the PMO. But actually, once I went into the PMO, and I've said this several times, I thought I died and gone to heaven, and actually never wanted to move out of the PMO. So some project and program managers now see this PMO manager role as a kind of a stepping stone in their career, to take their experience of project and program management and use it to do a good job in understanding what the project and program manager needs to actually set up a PMO for a project or program. So that might be another way in. So again, not necessarily your first job in project or program management or in PMO, but some multiple routes for getting into that position. So you can now see the diary of a PMO manager. So I love the thought. It looks as though it finishes at 3:30, but I'm sure the steering committee goes on for a couple of hours. So starting off the day, we've got some one-to-one performance review. So we've got people in the PMO team. My job includes line management of those PMO individuals. So we're going to be setting up some performance reviews for them. At 10 o'clock, I'm going to be involved in the community of practice meetings. So we're going to have a wider project and program management community of practice. So it's not just the PMO community of practice, actually, because we're seen to be leading and driving some of the project and program management processes, introducing some new elements, getting some feedback in terms of how the latest framework is working. We'll have that at the community of practice meeting for the individuals to interact with us. So that's going to be a really kind of hands-on session, interactive session with anybody who's involved in delivering projects in the organization. At 12 o'clock, we're going to have a team lunch. I know we always don't condone working through lunch, but at lunchtime, I'm going to meet with the quality team. Our PMO has put in place some audits, and we need some details in terms of kind of how that's going to work. So I'm going to chat through that over lunch. At 1 o'clock, a meeting I've really going to be looking forward to. So we're going to be meeting now with the supplier. We're going to be implementing a new PPM tool across one particular program. So we're going to just check through the requirements, and that way the supplier understands what we need. We've got a couple of people coming from the program as well, just to kind of make sure everybody's got a shared understanding about what the tool is there to do, and how that's going to be kind of potentially rolled out through the program. I've got a little bit of time in my diary before this afternoon just to catch up on emails and check that I've got everything I need for our steering committee meeting this afternoon. So as I said, this is a manager from a large program. So this is our program steering committee. So we've got all of the pack that's been produced. Just need to make sure I'm sure on all of the questions and challenges that I've got for the steering committee this afternoon, making sure I'm aware of the things that I need to raise to their attention, things that need to get answered on behalf of the program itself, but also the constituent projects that sit within that particular program. So quite a busy day. I've got a couple of other things that I also need to check up on as we go through when I get time to make a couple of phone calls and walk around the office. Firstly, we've got we're updating how we fill out timesheets, so I need to check that that's progressing well. One of the analysts is picking that up for me. One of our analysts is going off on a training course. I believe that's the House of PMO Essentials for Analysts course that we're getting that signed up for today. And we're also speaking to the program manager, because we need to think about what support we're going to give to a new project that's set up, and whether it needs its own individual PMO or whether we're just going to provide support from the program office. So you'll see as a PMO manager, although my job is manager, there's still quite a bit of work of hands-on support that I do. And one of the interesting things that we always cover off when we go through the training course is whether we still do what we call P3M delivery support. So being at the steering committee meeting is still actually kind of providing support for the decision makers at that table. But again, looking at the services that we currently provide, changes to that service or around the timesheeting process, adding new tools across the program, making sure the project and program managers are all fair with the changes and the updates that are happening. So quite a bit of kind of new development work, but also in terms of thinking about what services are in there, and also the resources in terms of who's working and delivering those services. So there we go. So are we not on the slideshow view? We should be able to see let me just swap those. Is that better? It was on the other screen. As far as I could see, everybody could see it. Good old technical challenges today. So let's have a look at kind of what the key responsibilities are that are listed for the PMO manager. So the top one, I think, is really kind of what we've described so far and seen, is that they have overall accountability for provision of the key PMO services that are delivered by that PMO. So planning, financial, resource management, risk and issue management, and kind of the whole plethora of services. But it's not necessarily that we are actually delivering those services ourselves, because we'll delegate responsibility across the PMO team to make it as effective as possible. So as the PMO manager, we might have agreed that we're going to be delivering a planning service, but I might actually get one of my analysts to actually define what that planning service looks like, ratify that, and then allow the PMO analyst to implement that service across the program. There's a question there in terms of the role of the PMO manager in the steering committee. We're not there necessarily as a decision maker. We're there to provide and to support the program manager, the program steering committee in making key decisions on the program and the constituent projects. Our role there is make sure that they have the information they need in a timely fashion, and be able to answer questions and provide potentially some recommendations. We will also challenge and look at the implications of the various outcomes that can be achieved depending on the decision they make. And as Lindsay and I have often described, or we're there really to hold up a mirror to the decision makers rather than being one of the decision makers ourselves. So the decision maker, the key decision maker on the program will be the program sponsor and the program manager, the program steering committee, and potentially the project managers that sit within that team. So going back to the responsibilities, the other thing we mentioned again is effective team development. We should be have an understanding of the skills and capabilities of each of the individuals who work within our PMO team, making sure that their skills are used to best effect to deliver the services that we have to provide for our project or program. And it's a really interesting one here in terms of there is definitely a balance of understanding, and again it changes from organization to organization, where we're limited sometimes by the resources in terms of what services we can provide, or in an ideal situation where we've identified what services we need, and then we get to pick and develop a team that has all of the requisite skills and capabilities. And typically in an organization, it probably is a kind of a bit of both. We know roughly what services we want to provide, so we kind of a combination of kind of skills and capabilities, and then as we establish the PMO, get that set up, we can kind of hone exactly who does what depending on their skills and capabilities. And then as we run the PMO, we can provide opportunities to members of our team to further develop their skills and knowledge around P3O support. One of the important roles or responsibility of a PMO manager is this promote and nurture a culture. So we're not then, we often hear that the PMOs get a reputation for being the project police. And we really, there's a lot of people kind of have suffered from that reputation, where actually what we really want to do is be seen to be the person who actually motivates the project manager, motivates the program manager, motivates the people who are working to support that project. So actually, they want to deliver that project and program well. And that doesn't mean kind of just the end result, but actually kind of use the right processes and procedures that have been defined by the organization to ensure that as an organization we get better and improve our project delivery capability over a period of time. And we will also have not just an understanding of the skills and capability of our own individual PMO, but typically we will have within the PMO, potentially working with the HR department, we will have an understanding of what delivery capability there is across the organization. So the skills and capability of project program managers, where the subject matter experts are across the organization, their availability. We'll also be looking at kind of what new skills are required, working with HR to understand how we would recruit those individuals, where would we recruit them from, to make sure that those resources are going to be in place for when they're needed by the project or program. And although as a PMO manager, we might be looking after a single project or program, the P3M standard, so how we deliver projects and programs, may sit at an enterprise level EPMO, enterprise PMO. The chances are that we've had to do some tailoring of those standards for our particular project and program. So, kind of the minimum tailoring might just be putting our program logo on some of the templates, but essentially that local P3M standards, how we're going to apply them on our particular project and program, sits with us as that PMO manager. And again, it may be through some of the use of a PMO administrator or a PMO analyst, but we will make sure that they're used across the project and program, and the project and program managers know what's involved and what support is available from the PMO. We may well design, implement and support effective P3M tools. Now, I think, and again, the previous slide when we talked about, kind of what happens in a PMO manager's day, we often think about those kind of large enterprise tools that we're purchasing, typically from a third-party provider. But actually, some of the kind of the tools that we use might just be a program tracker that we've developed in Excel. It may be a little bit more sophisticated, and we've had to engage with the IT department to develop that tool. But there are kind of various kind of tools that we might use. We may be, again, it may be we're using a small part of the corporate tool, but in terms of, again, tailoring, making sure we've got the right users in that system, they've got access to the right various elements to be able to effectively do their role. And the one that we find on every single PMO job role is around reporting. So again, it's about thinking about our particular project and program in view of what corporate reporting might be doing, what's required for PMO for a portfolio level, but what are the specific project and program reporting that we need. So again, going to that steering committee meeting, we might have taken the standard report, but we might have some additional things that our program or project might want to use, and certainly something that's we had a lot of conversation around LinkedIn at the minute, is particularly if we're working in a program which has a combination of waterfall projects and agile projects, how do we do that kind of hybrid reporting up for our kind of steering committee and up into portfolio level? And again, this is where we we can really add value by making sure we understand the decisions that need to be made, and making sure the information is presented in such a way that the options are clear to see, the implications of choosing any of those options are clear to see for the decision makers. Particularly when we're kind of at program level, we do need to make sure that there are clear roles and responsibilities and what governance looks like across that project and program, and making sure that we understand how they align and ensure there are no gaps or overlaps with corporate governance practices. So, sometimes that can be down to kind of who signs off project expenses. Does that kind of go in standard to finance? Is it different to kind of, does an individual need to do two expenses forms, once for project expenses, one for their business as usual expenses, right through to who actually makes those kind of key decisions that need the reporting that we've just previously talked about. And then the final responsibility is talks about kind of about some health checks and reviews. So this is a little bit of assurance on the project or program. Now, we can't do all of the assurance on the program, because true assurance needs to be, or kind of the complete picture of assurance need to have a level of objectivity. But certainly when we talk about the 3 lines of defense, certainly the first line of defense that we can kind of put in place. So kind of doing those kind of health checks and project reviews, making sure that we have got all of the right kind of processes and procedures are being followed, and that they're having the impact and effectiveness that we would be expecting from those processes. So quite a lot in terms of kind of overall responsibilities for a PMO manager. And again, we've limited ourselves to 8 or 9 key responsibilities per role, but that basically describes the breadth of what the role can be. Now, again, one of the things that we've had lots of conversations about in terms of doing the training is that not every PMO manager's role will necessarily require you to do all of these particular responsibilities. So again, that might be in your particular organization or your particular PMO manager's role. What we wanted to do when we did the role description, though, was really cover for the breadth. So if you were given this kind of the broad PMO manager's role, you would know enough to be able to kind of pick up all of these different elements. And so in order to be able to perform well, there is a combination of knowledge, skills, and behavior that really are going to make you effective. And in the competency framework, these are detailed out and again covered in the House of PMO certification. So let's just kind of start off with the knowledge that's required. So again, in the competency framework, there's a whole range to check from, but we just really kind of have picked out some of the key things that you will need to know. So again, first things first, change in delivery methods. There may be in our particular project and program a whole range of methods that are being used. Some of those might be just bespoke to our program. Some of them might be being trialed and piloted on our project. And in some, they may be tailored specifically at corporate level. And we've done some kind of further tailoring down at our particular project or program. So having an understanding, and let's just say that egg is not one of them. So those who kind of spotted the egg, it is actually kind of EG, a whole range that we've listed there and a whole kind of list of acronyms. So typically you might have a range of them or actually kind of just one or two specific ones. It's important to actually understand our corporate language and how we communicate. So we've also talked about things like kind of risk and change appetite and organization politics. So as a PMO manager, particularly where we're supporting the decision making, it's really important for us to recognize the language that we need to use and also how organizations communicate. In some organizations, there's lots of, we keep meetings to an absolute minimum. And I can hear everybody saying, well, certainly not in our organization, but there are some organizations where meetings are kept to a minimum. People like kind of out of meeting communication come together to make that decision making. Other organizations prefer everything to kind of be presented to them, kind of they can't read on their own. Everything kind of needs to be presented with them. In other organizations, information needs to be presented in a kind of particular sequence of events. So kind of more senior people get involved first before other individuals. So it's really about kind of understanding that and also understanding, what's acceptable. Abbreviations, jargon that's used within the organization and whether it's appropriate for the presentation, the meeting, the conversation that we're having as to when and how that's used. Understanding, because we're going to have to make sure that our PMO is performing well, we need to understand how the business works, how our metrics and the PMO feed back into those kind of corporate metrics to be able to demonstrate that we're doing what we said the PMO was set up to do, but also that the PMO is adding value to the organization. Recognizing where the organization is going, so the vision and aims and strategy, and a little bit about kind of what the business, the industry that the business kind of sits within, so we can kind of make sure that we understand where other of our potential competitors, how they're delivering, and what we need to do in terms of effectiveness to make sure that we keep ahead of the game. Once we get into being a PMO manager, we really also need to understand the wider kind of PMO theories and practice and understand kind of what's happening in the outside world, what new kind of services are being developed, what new theories are out there that might be relevant to our organization. And that leads us on to kind of, potentially related to that is any kind of service management concept. So we often talk about the service-based PMO. So what services are we providing? Are we doing that in the right way? Have we got the right metrics in place around that service? And again, we've talked about making sure that the governance structure is set up correctly for the project and program. So understanding what is required with from a governance perspective, what the standard governance structure is in the business as usual and where we interact is important. And I think the other thing that has come onto that, which again is relevant because of where we are with the tool in the example that we gave, is what the governance structure is with our customers and suppliers to make sure, again, we don't step on any toes unnecessarily, or we need to kind of establish how that will work with the PMO. So those are the key knowledge areas that we believe are important for a PMO manager. Onto some skills. Now, again, the competency framework has picked up a whole range of skills. We could say, well, every skill is important, but we kind of picked out some of the key ones that are relating to kind of our own particular skills and what we do on a day-to-day basis. Some of the comms skills that are really important to us, very much about, as we said, inspire there, because we want to create this right atmosphere and a environment for delivering well. Building up relationships. As a PMO manager, there's a wide range of relationships, both up, across and down, that we need to make across the organization. Undoubtedly, we'll have some kind of problem solving, looking at all of the different kind of challenges of providing all of the data together, looking at some of the things, the issues and challenges that the project and program will have. Looking at how best we can present that will be some of the problems that we have to deal with. And then also having a strategic perspective. And I think this is a really important one for a PMO manager, because what we don't want to do is be very inward looking. And I've seen a few PMO managers whose whole focus is about how is this PMO working? Are we doing a good job? But it has to be done within the wider context of the organization and the strategy, to make sure that we're aligned with where the organization is going, where our PMO project management industry is going, as well as the wider industry. So really, once we get to kind of the PMO manager role, we really need to start thinking perhaps a little bit more kind of strategically than perhaps we've done as a PMO analyst or PMO administrator. And then finally, in terms of the behaviours, and this is where in the development of the competency framework, we decided that actually all of the behaviours were relevant to every role. We didn't want to kind of take them out. And time and time again, we've seen that you can have all of the right knowledge and skills, but if you don't demonstrate the appropriate behaviours, then it becomes your knowledge and skills are actually kind of going to be wasted, because people are not going to want to engage with you, and they're not going to want to kind of reuse you on a future project as a PMO manager or a future program. So these behaviors are particularly important. Now, what I just wanted to do is I just wanted to go back to the PMO manager's diary and just demonstrate how those skills, knowledge, skills and behaviours were used. So I've just kind of picked our 1 o'clock meeting with the supplier for the new PPM tool to look at why and what combination we might be using. So first of all, the kind of P3M and PMO theories and practice, it's really important as we're having the meeting with the new PPM tool, we understand how that project management processes are going to be included, whether the system has been set up to replicate best practice, how that can be continued to be developed as we develop in our maturity as an organization. We're going to have to kind of balance the competing needs of the various people who will have those requirements versus what the supplier can provide, plus also considering about what time and effort is going to be required from the PMO team to actually kind of support the individuals and the tools who are going to be piloting and using that system. So again, demonstrating business and commercial acumen. Very often it's the PMO manager, sometimes it's the PMO director if we're doing a corporate wide one, who kind of talks to the supplier and kind of sets up and organizes the deal. So they may not necessarily have the final sign off of the budget for that tool, but certainly in terms of kind of setting that up and understanding what's available, what they get for that is very much within the PMO manager's role. A couple of other things in terms of kind of particular behaviors that we might want to use during these negotiations is about remaining objective rather than kind of jump into conclusions, having a real understanding about what the tool might be, having a real understanding about what the various users of the prospective users of the tool need, making sure we've got that information has been assimilated before we kind of jump to some conclusion based on kind of something we've used in a previous organization that we put in, and it was great in the last organization, may not necessarily be appropriate for the current organization or the role that we're doing. But also we want to make sure that we probe and challenge confidently, but in a professional manager. So be able to do that is a definite kind of things to kind of learn and practice about not seen to be aggressive, but making sure that actually we do get the answers to the questions that are required. So you'll see that, we could have done that for each of those activities. I've just picked one from the diary of the day, but hopefully you'll see then how you can start thinking about, kind of the kind of role that you need, which particular elements of knowledge, which particular skills, and which behaviors are most appropriate to the type of activity that you're going to undertake. So we've got a kind of a question there around PMO managers about who defines and documents the governance and the budget approval levels. And so this is an interesting one. So essentially what you've got from an organization perspective, you will have some defined sign-off levels for your particular typically it goes with your role. So if you're a senior manager, you can sign off X thousands of pounds. If you're a kind of an executive, you can sign off a few more thousand. When it comes to project and program management and who gets to sign off what those budget levels are, it can be decided at two levels. And we'll come on to this when we talk about the enabling competencies, because actually it can be agreed on a project and program level. And typically, as the PMO manager, you will make sure that's in alignment, and so it is what it's required for that project or program, or it will be decided at an organizational level across every project and program, and typically that would be done by the PMO director. So again, it depends on what level the governance is established at. And so typically if you've got what we would call an integrated PMO model, where you've got all of your kind of PMOs understood and you're all working to the same rules under a PMO director, it would be done at corporate level. In those organizations where we've got multiple PMOs, but we're all kind of our own independent PMOs with kind of no links between them, essentially that PMO manager would ensure the governance structure for the project was appropriate. So hope that answers that question. So let's have a look at the certification and just kind of demonstrate how this Essentials for PMO Managers course really kind of sets you up in order to be able to kind of put your foot in the door as a PMO manager. Now, the Essentials for PMO Manager course is exactly that. It's for kind of aspiring or new PMO managers who are kind of going into that role. So again, there is an expectation if you're going into if you're going on that course, and there are prerequisites that will be checked prior to you attending, that you have a practitioner knowledge in project, program, or portfolio manager. Now that doesn't mean you need to have done project and program management. It could mean that you've been working as a PMO analyst and supporting a number of projects and programs. But what the course won't do is actually teach you what is project and program or portfolio management. So there is an expectation when you're going into that manager's role, and when you go into this Essential for PMO Managers course, that actually you will already kind of know the bones of that. And what we're going to be talking to about, what are the specific things that you'll be doing as a PMO manager, to make sure that you support an effective delivery of that project or program. So the elements of the course are taken based on the PMO competency framework, and you'll see there are PMO competency domains, and there's 3 elements that we cover off on the House of PMO Essentials for PMO Manager course. We do generic delivery support, so we don't go into detail of all of the kind of the individual elements that sit within there. We talk generically about P3M delivery support. We talk about the PMO management competence, and we talk about these P3M enabling competences. Now, as I just mentioned about the governance, and you'll see governance is in there as well. So for these kind of 6 elements, we've said typically an organization in a well-structured organized or delivery organization where they have a PMO director who oversees all of the PMOs and they're working holistically in an integrated PMO model, the likelihood is you're going to do that once at that kind of PMO director role. In lots of organizations where that's not necessarily in place, where we've either just got a single PMO or where we've got multiple PMOs, but they're completely autonomous, the PMO manager is going to have to pick up these 6 enabling competences to make sure that it's appropriate for our particular project and program. So we cover off generic delivery support, PMO management, and we cover off all 6 of the P3M enabling competencies. The other textbooks that we refer to is the PMO service catalogue. And again, what we try to do is for all of the House of PMO certification courses, we want to give a demonstration of what some services might look like that are being provided specifically by the PMO, but the PMO manager. So we refer back to the service catalogue. So for those of you who've got it, you'll realise it's a great big kind of tome, and what we do is we kind of pick out elements of that. And when we're looking for some project or program management theory, just to kind of, because it adds to the conversation, we also refer back to the Praxis framework. Now, the Praxis framework is there as a book. For those of you who don't know, Praxis framework is also there as a website. So that's www.praxis.org. praxisframework.org. Lindsay will put that up in the chat any minute now. And so there's a whole free website that you can access that covers off project, program, portfolio management, maturity, etc. So we use that. Now, it is important to say what House of PMO have done is when they've set up the certification, they've said, much as those books and references will be great for not just doing the course, but for lots of other things. But for those service providers who don't provide them, or the course material has everything you need from all 3 of those elements for you to pass the exam. So particularly here at the House of PMO Learning, we provide the textbooks for the administrator course. They don't come as part of the package for the analyst, manager, or director courses. But if you have a chat with Jen at hello@pmolearning.com, we can add that to your order and get them delivered to you. But actually, the course material has everything you need in order to pass the exam. So the idea of doing the course and what it will provide for you, it will give you a kind of a much broader understanding of the PMO manager role than we've kind of covered off today. We'll talk about kind of the context with it when it sits. That we'll talk about the manager role in context with the admin, analyst, and director, and then we'll go through in quite a bit of detail around the kind of the 8 competencies that are relevant. So let's just kind of have a quick look in a little bit more detail of what's done. So the first thing is that although we don't cover off project and program management, we give a little bit of a refresher in terms of the different types of PMO exist, and we do a quick catch up on PMO services, service roles, and key documentation. So this whole concept of a service-based PMO, and this bit is not examinable on the course. but something that we kind of cover off just to make sure if you've not worked in a service-based PMO before, you actually get an understanding of what that is. When we talk about context on a manager's course, what we're talking here is about that PMO life cycle, so that kind of design and build, the run, transform and close PMO. So what are the key activities within the PMO life cycle? And we talk about this thing called the Cynefin model, because we recognize that in some organizations to set up a PMO is actually more straightforward. It's never easy, but it's more straightforward than obviously some large, complex multinational organization. And the Cynefin model provides us with some kind of different environments, and the approach to setting up that PMO will differ depending on the complexity of the environment within which we're working. So I found that really interesting to go through, and certainly the delegates who've been through the course really helped them start thinking about the best approach for setting up a PMO in their organization. We then cover off the roles. So we will talk generically about all 4 roles, but we will go into a lot more detail of the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are required by the PMO. So we go into a little bit more detail in terms of where you might get that knowledge from, how to build and apply your skills, and the impact of key behaviours, and specifically some of the impacts where we don't necessarily demonstrate the appropriate behaviours. When we get on to delivery support, and again, we don't talk about all of that. As I said, we don't talk about the individual elements of that, but we do talk about that even as a PMO manager, you will be doing some generic delivery activities. So again, attending the steering committee, about working on some of the reporting that's being provided, that all kind of sits within the role of the PMO manager. And then we go on to the PMO management competence. And again, the PMO management competence is about making sure that we understand how to run that life cycle of the PMO. And it's important here to recognize that the PMO management competence doesn't necessarily cover off your kind of line management activities, because we recognize that line leadership and management competence, the generic leadership and management competence of dealing with staff, is not specific to a PMO, and typically your organization will have its own kind of structure and how that needs to be done. So when we talk about the PMO management competence, we're talking specifically about the management of the PMO and not the people within it. And then finally, we go on to, and again, we'll talk about the same things, the kind of the key terms and artifacts, the definition and the description of the 6 enabling competencies. So capacity management, so kind of how many people have we got? Does it fit with what we want to do? Capability development to make sure we've got the right skills and capability, delivery capabilities across the project and program. So this is not just about PMO skills. This is also about project program management, SME availability, etc. We also talk about the various different delivery methods and how that might play, governance frameworks, assurance, and P3M tools. So again, that's quite a bit of the time to go through the 3-day course for the PMO managers. So hopefully that's helped a little, but I do want to just kind of give some insight into kind of, well, what does, kind of being a PMO manager, because it does range from organization to organization. So we wanted to just kind of put in place, just to give you a kind of an insight, perhaps how you might go on to develop your career in PMO management. So typically, your first PMO management role is running a project or program PMO. Okay, so you may even have had the opportunity as a PMO analyst to there's a small project that's been set up. They want somebody to work 2 days a week to kind of look after the services that are provided into that PMO. So you may never have kind of been given the job of PMO manager. You might have been called a PMO lead. You may have maintained your job role as PMO analyst, but essentially what you're doing is looking after the services that are being delivered to that particular project or program. Now, as you develop your skills and capability as a PMO manager, the next thing, and again, this is replicated in the competency framework that says running a PMO of all of the stages of the PMO life cycle is probably the most straightforward. So once you've kind of got your head around that, then actually being able to design and build a PMO is really kind of the next step. So it's much easier. I've always said it's much easier to drive a car than to build a car. Yes, so the similar concept with a PMO, once you've run it, then actually you're then going to be able to design and build it and actually potentially close one out. And there are different, and we've talked about kind of different PMOs. And so once we've run a project or program PMO, then actually what we might want to do in terms of a next step is looking at a portfolio PMO, which again, kind of instead of working with project and program managers and project and program steering groups, we're very much working at a different level in the organization. We're learning with the kind of the executive team, either of a division or the executive team across the whole organization. So running a portfolio office, or what we would call a centralized enterprise PMO, so where there is a single PMO office that provides support across the organization. And what we might often find as well as we're kind of stepping up to that role, what you might also get is line management of the project and program managers. So again, because we've already talked about as a PMO manager, we might have sight of capability of the wider delivery team. When we get to kind of this more senior PMO manager, often within the role is this line management of the delivery team. Now, I will say quite categorically that doesn't mean we are accountable for the delivery of all of the projects and programs, because that will always sit with the program managers and program and project sponsors and program and project managers. But in terms of having project and program managers to allocate out to sponsors may sit within our role. And then again, probably the kind of the more senior role is where we've got that whole kind of remit, and we're sitting in a centralized EPMO, or we're sitting in a EPMO structure that looks after all of the services across the organization. And there is sometimes what we found in an organization, they don't necessarily have a PMO director. And so what we say is sometimes where you're a PMO manager and you're the PMO manager, it very much can start actually looking like the PMO director's role. So where we're a PMO director, which is really kind of the next step on from a PMO manager, and there's a different certification for that as well, and a job role and description, is where here we're not thinking about my PMO and what my PMO does and the services I provide with my team. It's about saying, actually, as a PMO director, we're now saying, what number of PMOs do we need across the whole organization? How many PMO managers do we need? What services do they need in those various different PMOs? So again, you can see how you can transition from being a PMO manager running a small project PMO right up to being the PMO manager, the PMO director that oversees all of the PMOs across that organization. And again, rather than just picking up a few project and program managers, you may actually kind of have line management of the whole delivery function, and be the head of profession, or have somebody working with you as the head of profession for the various elements of project, program management, risk management, etc. So I think, kind of going back to kind of whether I've come into the PMO to go on and be a project and program manager, I think this kind of quite clearly shows that there is a career path staying within the PMO that will continue to develop and challenge you for a number of years. So in terms of becoming a PMO manager, just kind of coming back to kind of where we started from, it really is having that worked in a project and program environment and had experience in a PMO supporting projects and programs, and have an understanding of the PMO manager role, so kind of the breadth and depth of that. And in terms of the kind of the learning objectives of the essentials for PMO managers, we've just kind of bullet pointed them there, so you can see about actually what's covered on the course and what types of discussions we will have. So there's a final question that's come up there in terms of talking about a PMO manager who is a subject matter expert instead of having line management responsibilities, please. So just so I don't understand the kind of the exact detail. I'm just working about whether I'm a PMO subject matter expert and a PMO manager. Is that what the question is asking about? So what you might often find is actually as a PMO manager, you're leading the services of that PMO, but you may not necessarily have line management of the individuals who sit within that PMO. So give me a couple of examples of what that might mean. I'm sitting here as the PMO manager for a project. We've agreed some processes with finance in terms of how PMO, how the processes work with projects and programs. So as a PMO manager, we see, part of the services that each project will get will be a budget review at the end of every month. Now, the person who actually undertakes that actually works in the finance department. So we would be interacting with the finance department to resource that from their department. So again, we don't necessarily have line management responsible for the people, but we've established the services that need to be delivered by that PMO. So quite a few organizations, and again, that often works with kind of procurement services, development services, which we'd work with HR. It might even be involved in some of the review services. So we might work with internal audit, who actually do some of those assurance activities rather than within the individual PMO. So final slide then for us is thank you very much for attending the course. If you've got any questions or any outstanding questions, do send them through to us and we will answer them for you. Okay, so very nice to meet you. I hope you've enjoyed the session and found it useful. If you need anything at all, feel free. You can find us on www.pmolearning.co.uk or email at hello@pmolearning.co.uk. Thank you very much.